So, welcome to the future of the payments business and the innovation that powers it. Welcome to TRANSACT. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce to you, here on the TrustWave keynote stage, our opening keynote. It's a look at how innovations in integrated software are changing what we used to call the point of sale, and now we call the point of interaction. You probably know that US retailers are forecasted to spend nearly $1.7 billion on point of interaction hardware in each of the next 2 years. The continued evolution of the point of sale remains important as retailers look to their point of sale equipment to handle much more than just a card transaction. So now let's discuss the disruptive, I think is the best way to think of it, this disruptive new industry trend with two pioneers of payments technology. Point takes a unique approach in the hardware design of their point of interaction devices. Helping to power the hardware of Point is innovative software developed by TALC. It's time now to hear how partnerships between software and hardware companies are the future of our industry. Please join me in welcoming to the TrustWave keynote stage Osama Bedier, founder and CEO of Point, and Irv Henderson, co-founder and CEO of TALC. I did that too. Osama, welcome. Irv? Please. So, a little bit about Irv, co-founder and CEO of TALC. As I mentioned, he founded TALC out of an interest, I think, best described as helping business owners use data to better run their business, what we like to call the small data opportunity when everyone wants to talk about big data. Right. Irv served quite a bit of time in Yahoo and at OboPay, and also, and I think this is probably the most impressive part of your resume, as you are not only an innovator and a founder, you also hold 9 patents yourself, so you know from whence you speak about the software industry. And Osama, of course, doesn't need a lot of introduction. Industry legend. Although still alive, so not that kind of industry legend. Although barely alive, because he just came off a red eye from London. Yeah. Osama is the founder and CEO of Point, which is the creator of the world's first small business-focused smart payment terminal, an Egyptian-American entrepreneur and investor. He spent, I think, 2 decades, is it safe to say, in this business, pioneering consumer internet, e-payments, e-commerce, payment services, and perhaps best known, for better or worse, running Google Wallet for quite a bit of time. Also 9 years at PayPal, is that right? Great, so a payments industry veteran. So let's talk about what's going on in this brave new world of ISVs, software and hardware. So Osama, I talked a little bit about you, but I think it's most important that you tell us where Point came from, how you came to found the company, what it was you were hoping to accomplish, and where you are in the path.
Sounds good. Well, it started out as an idea about 5 years or 6 years into PayPal. We watch consumer behavior very closely. That's why PayPal actually exists. In fact, a lot of people don't know that PayPal had 5 failed business models before they were ultimately successful. And a lot of that success came from watching what consumers wanted and were not getting. And so after a bit of success, we had a lot of data on consumers, and we saw that there was a shift. There was a pretty big shift from seeing the world as online only versus offline only to one where the consumer didn't care anymore. And the problem with that is PayPal was very successful online. And so if that happened too fast, we wouldn't have a product if consumers didn't care about the difference. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get to point of sale. And along the way, found that a lot of the amazing things we had data and capabilities to deliver from an engineering perspective, we just couldn't get it in front of the merchant so that they can service their consumer in a way that leveraged all this technology. And that ultimately led to me actually leaving PayPal because I felt like that distance was just too far. And a lot of it was because technology was missing on the consumer side as well. Therefore, Google Wallet, figuring out how to put NFC on mobile phones. But the problem stuck with us. In fact, at Google, I was naive enough to think that you can solve for it with a smart device on the consumer side. And so 3 years of Google Wallet and a lot of coalition building and inventing solutions that I actually think will end up being the standard. We're well on our way there. It stuck with us. The idea of getting software in front of the merchants so that they can service their customer was just as hard at Google. And so this is when I decided to leave Google and start a company that helps deliver software as a primary value proposition. And it required, in fact, we first started out thinking, hey, the hardware has to be out there. We should just build the software for it on the merchant side. We ended up building the hardware as well, and I'm glad to see that the whole industry is now shifting to these smart devices.
Yep. And speaking of smart devices, Irv, tell us where the idea for TALAK came from to build the software that powers those smart devices.
I'm happy you decided to build the hardware. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, so the word TALAK is an ancient Mayan word that means someone who listens. So I'm originally from Belize, and the Mayan people lived in Belize for 2,500 years ago. There were probably about 1 million people living in Central America. So Belize, Mexico, Guatemala. But I was inspired by this idea when I was at Yahoo. I was responsible for basically mobilizing the Yahoo products as well as Yahoo Local. And I became acutely aware that the software in small businesses was really non-existent. It was fairly primitive in the way that business owners ran their businesses. And that became an interesting kind of, for me, it was a moment of, well, this could be so different. That you could run your business so differently if you had software running that business and run it far more efficiently. But I was also onto the problem that you mentioned, which is it is incredibly difficult, as everybody in the room knows, to get to the small business. So one of the things I did at Yahoo was back in 2005, 2006, we preloaded Yahoo Messenger, Yahoo Mail, and all of Yahoo products to all the major handset manufacturers. Motorola, Samsung, some names you won't even recognize anymore. They're no longer around, Nokia, BlackBerry RIM. From 2005 to 2008, we went from about 30,000 users to over 100 million users by preloading our software to the hardware. I remember sitting in a meeting in Seoul with LG. There were 40 people in the room. There were three software developers of their 40 and 2 people from Yahoo. And at that moment in time, I knew we were just in the wrong place. Basically, we were at a moment where software was going to dominate the hardware. And everybody in the room was just sitting at this moment of like not getting it. But that was really important. And it significantly impacts the way TALAK comes to market. We think of developing real compelling software, and we think of matching it together with real compelling hardware platforms to deliver a strong proposition to customers. For business owners, for us in the end, the core thing we're trying to solve is reduce their stress. Business owners start businesses out of a passion for whatever they're interested in. It could be baking or fashion. But these business owners often don't understand, if they're successful, many times they fail, they don't understand a lot of the context that's operating, including all the accounting and the finance and running the business operationally. Software, if well executed, make that world so simple. You don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be a statistician or a CPA. To deliver data simply to business owners to help them run their business is transformative in the very basic thing of how they end their day. Everything is in the cloud. It's synchronized, right? You don't have to worry about your accountant. You sync seamlessly to QuickBooks, Xero, right? Sage. It just happens in the background. Transformative. It changes the way businesses run their business, and you don't have to be sophisticated to do it.
Right, so as I mentioned in my opening remarks, everyone here is here for one of 2 reasons. They either, as the 2 of you do, make a product that the sales channel sells to merchants, or they are the sales channel to merchants. So you've talked a little bit about your collaboration on the product side, the software and hardware collaboration. But I think one of the most interesting bits of news, if you will, is the partnerships that you're working on together on the sales channel side to get this software and hardware collaboration to market. So tell me what you have to update us all on about that sales channel progress.
Can I go quickly first?
Go ahead.
Both our companies are in Palo Alto, and for a long time, actually, we were half a block from each other. 2 years ago, do you remember this walk?
Yeah, I do.
We went for a walk, and we were exchanging notes and go-to-market, because we were both busy building stuff. And we talked about our go-to-market strategy. So we are very partner-friendly. We don't go direct. And our primary focus in our business strategies, we go through banks. So Osama and I went for a long walk, and we just talked about kind of how this was all going. Fast forward to where we are now, back in December, actually, I went down just before the holidays, went to Osama. We just sat down, and we just had this, thinking about the possibilities conversation. But what I love about that, of course, is that we can go from that moment to immediate execution. What we are doing next week is we're launching our joint product, and we talk about how we've stitched it together, but we're launching on US Bank Elavon, and a month later we're going to launch it on Chase. But we think this sets the bar in terms of the customer experience of their software and their hardware combined, and we think it's just going to be really compelling for business owners. So.
Yeah, so Osama, can you talk a little bit about what's the market segment that your bank partners are hoping to reach with this?
Yeah.
What are the needs of the merchant customer that are not currently being met, that are going to be met now that you guys are partnered with them?
So maybe let me set it up first, in case you don't know us. We built this amazing piece of hardware that is, think of it as, we took the terminal, which we believe is the most ubiquitous piece of technology in retail globally, and said instead of being a dumb device that just does one thing, payment processing, it should be the computer. And it should enable the transaction to integrate to every piece of software that the merchant leverages. And you shouldn't have to buy a new piece of hardware, whether it's a tablet or a PC or anything else, for those capabilities to be available to you. And we partner with acquirers and ISOs around the world to sell that proposition together. Instead of selling your dumb terminal, sell these smart terminals, and we're in the business of delivering the perfect software for your small businesses and benefit together. Now, the interesting thing about software is not how amazing is it, is how do you get the right software to the right person who needs it. And while computers have been around for decades, let's call it 7 or 8 decades now, the interesting thing is in the last year, more software has been installed than all of the history of computing put together. And that continues to be the case. So why are we consuming so much more software than ever before? Because the smartphone made it from a complicated, go to the store, select, research, figure out whether it works, bring it home, install it, to a click and it's done. And in fact, social media on the consumer side, all your friends tell you the perfect software to install. On the business side, it's not that easy. In fact, not only did this ability of smartphones did not exist until recently, but also connecting the merchant to the perfect set of software. There's usually 3 or 4 pieces of software that the merchant can't live without. And so the value proposition here is, in working with Irv, is he's got amazing software for food and retail. How do we put that in front of the right merchant without them ever even asking? And so they get to try it and love it and continue to use it without having to go through that whole process of which software should I use it. And so that's the partnership. We've said where Talic is a perfect fit, let's just put it right in front of that merchant and let's let them use it for free. And when they like it is when they start paying for it.
And so Irv, how do you equip your partners, your sales channel partners, to tell the story that Osama is talking about? Because traditionally, it's been a much different value proposition. Here's a card acceptance terminal, it accepts cards, and that's it. Now you almost have to arm them with engineering information, and how do you, since you don't do it direct, how do you help the sales channel make that completely different value proposition clear to a merchant? Yeah, no,
100%. The beauty of what we're talking about actually is, this is pretty cool.
No.
Point is just a terminal, ostensibly. And so the way that you actually insert that first experience to the customer could be quite basic, just use the terminal. But if you are using data-driven models in the background to present to that customer as their behavior is evolving, let's take an example for a business that starts out as one location, very simple, but the business is quite successful. And that business has ambitions over time to do multiple locations, and you could see the business growth. As the business is growing, the accountant is saying we need to have QuickBooks integrated, done. Background, there are about 5 to 6 software that dominate every business. And they say we need an online feature, done. You can add that as an additional component, right? Or also we need to better track our labor management. Well, Homebase, our partner Homebase is in the audience, integrated as well. Turns out, the way that you introduce that product from a sales perspective initially could be quite basic, all the way to a very advanced sales process. You can take a sales team that is very focused on selling restaurants, and you can actually walk in with a strong proposition right away with all the advanced features by just stepping up the capabilities that you have inside Talik combined with Point. So, and that's truly, truly compelling. You can on-ramp yourself from a sales perspective at a very entry level. But you've actually touched on a super important issue, which is there's structural employment issues going on in the sales forces across the board. And that is because of all the software, as Osama is talking about, that's coming forward, sales team are actually often on their heels in terms of how they respond to the customer needs as the customer is asking for more capabilities. That requires training. It is non-trivial. It takes time. We spend an enormous amount of time at Talik making sure that sales teams are properly trained up to pre-qualify customers for that reason.
Osama, this is an enormous transformation to the point of sale, as we were talking about earlier, the migration from the dumb terminals, I don't want to be mean to the terminals, but you know what I mean, to the smart terminals. Yours and a lot of great companies have these great smart capabilities. How long a trajectory are we on here? How long is it going to be before every merchant understands what a smart terminal is and everybody's got one on the countertop? Are we talking a couple years? Are we talking 10 years? What's your view out on the migration to smart terminals?
We track this fairly well. I think 3 years from now, the majority of all terminals will be smart. 5 years from now, it'll be hard to find a dumb terminal. And that's for a very important reason. The industry is going through a pretty significant change. You know, Ted Levitt, the father of modern marketing, used to be a Harvard professor, wrote a pretty important piece of work in 1960 called Marketing Myopia. And the idea was, you got to know what business you're in, not what product you're selling. What businesses you're in is defined by what your customers want. And so his example was if the railroads knew they were in the transportation business, instead of the railroad business, they'd be the airlines. And that, you know, in 1960, the airlines were the biggest thing and the railroads were dying. And this is important for the space we're in. What business are we in? If you think you're selling transaction processing, that business is dying. We are in the software business. It's about delivering software that makes merchants' businesses better. Transaction processing was one of the most transformative software capabilities in the history of man, but it's become commonplace. And now acquiring is about delivering more integrated software solutions to those businesses. And so if you're not doing that, then somebody else who is will take over the business. That's why it's changing so fast.
Irv, do you like Osama's 3-year projection for majority of terminals being smart terminals in the US?
I like it because it's aggressive. Our lessons jointly in this space may tell us it's a little bit longer, but I think the meta comment on that is it's inevitable. I think it'll be very difficult 5 years from now for you to walk into the corner store and that corner store not having a next generation POS. That seems pretty obvious at this point, and that's probably the most important issue. Customers are demanding true experiences from the person who's walking into their stores selling them services. So, yeah. 3 years may be aggressive. 5 years, definitely.
Well, we'll check back in 3 years. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Osama, based on your time at PayPal and running Google Wallet, your quick assessment of the mobile payments landscape and the extent to which some of the driving force for the adoption of smart terminals is going to be contactless. We know contactless cards are coming in the market this year in the US for the first time, really. Mobile payments are starting to catch on. What's your assessment of the landscape, and what's the extent to which that's a helpful driver to the smart terminal adoption?
Well, it's a good question. Since we did Google Wallet about 6 years ago, it's amazing how it's been so long. $1.5 billion phones have been shipped with the ability to tap. What's missing is on the other side, getting enough relevance so that you can tap everywhere. And that's always a story of payments, right? You have to get to relevance and then it takes off. PayPal did more business in its 7th year than the 6 years previously combined because we hit that point of relevance. And I think we're going to get to that point in the next year or two. More importantly, it wasn't about the hardware, it was about the fact that, again, consumers no longer differentiate. You know, back then, when I first started thinking about it 10 years ago, it was, people called me crazy, online and offline blurring. Now it's obvious, right? And in fact, you no longer call yourself a mobile business or a mobile app. You're just a business. And in fact, many of the most successful startups in history now are mobile only or mobile first businesses. We kind of forget that. And so we're going into a phase of the world where technology, and this is just a big tectonic shift, technology is, you know, for 100 years, technology was about making things faster. Everything is, so in our business, transaction processing faster. The terminal made you go through the checkout lane faster. And we're going into this shift where there's so much data about everything that's becoming about better. Using technology to do better than a person can. And specifically in retail, Amazon is showing that. You can do better even though you don't touch and feel the product. That's crazy, right? That shouldn't exist. But the largest retailer in the world, Amazon, you actually don't touch the product, but you could do better with technology. I think when that merges back to offline the other way, it'll be game changing, and it requires, you know, I'm finally seeing the picture where smart devices in consumers' hands, smart devices in the merchants' hands, and you create a much better experience on top of data.
That's a nice way to think about it, and it helps wrap our conversation on why software and hardware are working so well together. Congratulations to the two of you on this great announcement with Elevon and Chase coming up next month. Osama, thank you for sitting here with us. Irv, thanks for all you do for ETA and helping us program all the great content we have to continue this discussion in the session rooms throughout the day today. Please join me in thanking Osama Bedier and Irv Henderson.
Thanks for having us.